This is the Griffin Realty Group Ask-A-Griffin podcast, episode number 47. We enter a new phase in the home buying process called closing. And the question on the table is, do you have to sweat the details during the closing process? Are you a home seller or a home buyer who has questions about selling or buying residential property, but you can't find an easy way to get your answers? Well, then, hey, you are definitely in the right place. I'm Danny Griffin, the founder of the Griffin Realty Group and the host of the Ask-A-Griffin podcast. And to help you take immediate action to get started in the right direction, if you need to buy or sell residential property right now or in the very near future, you can take advantage of our free step-by-step guides that are waiting for you at griffincourses.com. Okay, let's get started. In this episode, like I said, we enter a very serious phase in the home buying process, which is the final phase, and it's called closing, the closing process. And the question on the table, do you have to sweat the details during the closing process? So the reason I posed it that way, and we get this question all the time, so I just reiterate it in my own words or my own question, and it's almost as if it's a rhetorical, of course. It's a rhetorical, yes, definitely. But I want you to sweat the details because you are ultimately responsible for the money, the earnest money deposit and whatever type of process you have. You might go straight to purchase and sale agreement where you would have a significant amount of money being held in escrow or a less significant amount of money, but you're entering into a contract. And in Massachusetts, at least as I'm recording this, I'm speaking only to the Massachusetts process, which is pretty similar across the country. You're in a contract that obligates you. And that obligation should always be taken seriously. Now, of course, there are fill in the blanks. You don't know this, but of course, we know this. As realtors, professional real estate agents, we know that this is a pre-approved legal document. So when you sign it, you're obligated to do certain things in that legal document. So obviously, it's always wise to consult an attorney, even though a lot of these forms are pre-approved or attorney approved by really the legal counsel for the association. And it's for the mutual beneficial protection of all parties. But of course, when you are the buyer, it is very important, and we highly recommend it all the time, to be legally represented. You're entering into something very serious at this point in time, and it's just best to have a pro. So let me just say that. But the first point here is that once a contract is signed, details must be followed to protect your money and your purchase. So I think we get so emotional when we're in the process. And even for very savvy, smart business people or just people who are great at self-education, you just get so emotional during this process. You just want it to be over. You've gone through this process of looking for a property. Maybe you've lost out on a bunch that you liked and you finally have this property and you win. And you get the seller's signature and your signature and everything is there. And it's almost like you want to just let down as if it's all over. In fact, if I were to look at the whole home buying process and I were to just isolate the closing process, it's almost like a whole process in and of itself. And I'll get into why in a second here. So I just want to say that the gravity of this final stage is everything. You could have come all of this way. And in our case, we break it or chunk it up into 6 phases. We're in the 6th phase. This is it. But I can make an argument. This is the most harrowing phase. And it can really get the best of you if you're not organized. So once a contract is signed, details must be followed by you. Don't just defer or abdicate responsibility. They must be followed by you. You're ultimately responsible for the protection of your money. Yes, you could have a great realtor. Yes, you could have a great attorney. Yes, but this is your transaction and you really want that property. You don't want to slide all the way back. So if something goes haywire during this contractual obligation period and you don't perform, you could lose the purchase. You could lose your money. So there we go. Double underline on yes, of course, it's important for you to pay attention to details. The second point is that the critical details come in phases and they come with deadlines. So you must adhere to all critical dates and deadlines. And if anything changes, you must secure all those changes in writing. That's a very important fact. I think we've worked with people before, and this is for all my fellow realtor friends who might be listening to this as well. It's best once a contract is signed Everybody takes a breath. And hopefully you've gone over the contract and its details prior to this, I understand, but I'm talking about a reiteration of what's just been agreed to from a time frame. Because sometimes we can sort of let down and we think about, okay, well, there are critical dates about what? Well, the securing of a home inspector. Usually you have a very tight accordion squeeze on the time that you need to get a home inspection done, especially in a hot market where there are backup offers. The seller has just said yes to you. They've given you that courtesy. But if you start dragging your feet on trying to get a home inspector to get in there and do your due diligence, you definitely are going to risk the ability to move on to the next phase. And I always, as a professional, highly recommend you get an inspector in there. I don't like, unless you are a really savvy investor who understands product and even a builder, I don't recommend it because you just don't know what you don't know. And there's nothing wrong with taking a physical inventory of the property. So have that really well thought out even before you get there. Be working with your realtor as to the three. And again, our obligation, even if we're representing the buyers, to give you a variety of people that you can vet yourselves. Of course, you're relying on us, but get 3 people, maybe even more. Vet them. What do you like about the way that they do a home inspection? How do they present all of what they just found to you? Do they have a good bedside manner? Do they dump it off on you? Again, this is your process, and so. Even though you have a good realtor, still ask these types of, and I'm helping you here, ask the right questions. These are the questions and these are the ideas that you will need with or without us. So all of those critical dates and deadlines are your obligation. So if something is to change, let's say we are in such a hot market that you have had some warm-up conversations with several home inspectors that you like, and then all of a sudden you're under agreement and you got squeezed into a 7-day period because that was the only way you're going to tie up the property, and now you can't get that inspector. But you can get them on the 8th day. And you go back to your realtor and you tell them that, or your realtor's helped you with it and you know that, then if you're going to ask for more time, let's say you need 2 more days extension for that, you need that specific change in writing. Don't ever take anything verbally during this time frame if you want best practices. If you do it without something in writing that all parties agree to any changes to the original contract, you are putting your money and your purchase at risk. I'm going to repeat this. You are putting your money and your purchase at risk if it's not in writing. Now, let me get to the third part here. When you're in this closing process, like I said, it's this major process within the process. There are many new parties to the transaction that are actually introduced just at the beginning or during the closing process, who must all now be coordinated. So let me just go down a short list of some of them. I just mentioned one, the home inspector. I'll mention another. If you waited all the way to certainly just get an offer, a contract signed first, now you have to find the attorney who can help you with the rest of it, or the escrow company, depending on what state you're in. They get introduced. So all their personalities, all of their processes. Right? And let's just say the general home inspector, the generalist comes back and said, you need a pest inspector to look at this pest issue. You need a structural engineer. See what I mean? All of a sudden the orchestra seats start filling up. And remember, we have this time crunch. Tick, 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 tick before we close. So all of this is happening very quickly. So it's best to be out in front of understanding it and how it affects you. So as we introduce all of these new parties, and there are more, but I don't want to overwhelm you. I just want to say, be aware. Who will you need? It's pretty obvious when you look at things there, right? You need the attorney or some in an escrow company that's giving you that advice about monies and transfer and all that. You need that home inspector. You might need multiple inspectors. You certainly need to rely on your closing department that your realtor has, and that might be the introduction of a closing coordinator. So and then we have the complication of all the other sides. So the seller has an attorney that gets introduced now that you didn't know before. So the moving company, that's a big one. Their moving company, your moving company. So there are all of these forces and people that can affect these deadlines. And like I said, I will repeat, you really need to be cognizant that all this is happening. So let's go back and review what we're talking about here today. In this part of the home buying process, and again, remember, you can get one of these free entire guides so you see how all these podcast items come together. One short magazine type course. You can get that at griffincourses.com. Just ask us for one, and we'll be happy to get it to you. Or we can even give you an infographic that at least chunks it up into the 6 points, or we'll give you both, whatever you want. But that's the key point here, is that you're entering the most harrowing, nerve-wracking part of this process called closing. And the question on the table is, do you have to sweat the details during the closing process? Obviously, that's a rhetorical question. The answer is yes. So you start off this closing process by considering that once a contract is signed, details must be followed to protect your money and your purchase. Secondly, you must adhere to all those critical dates and deadlines and secure any changes to those critical dates and deadlines in writing. Third, there are many new parties to the transaction that are introduced during this closing process for the very first time, and they all must be coordinated. Understand them, lean on your realtor for some help, but don't abdicate responsibility. Understand how this works. Let me summarize it this way. When you enter into a contract to purchase a property, you have agreed to adhere to certain critical dates, deadlines, and action steps that you must take. These details are not to be ignored or taken lightly if you expect to protect your deposit money and ultimately your successful purchase of that property that you really want. All right, now remember, I'll say this again. You can take immediate action to get started in the right direction if you need to sell or buy residential property right now or in the near future by getting the full strategic step-by-step guides and plans that we will give you at griffincourses.com. Griffin, Griffin, courses.com. Also, don't forget, of course, you could subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen. And you can find us also on our social media channels so that you don't miss out on any of the insights each time we upload an episode. That'll keep you in this process. And I get it. This is a podcast that's particular to the home selling, home buying, and the becoming a successful agent podcast series. I get it that might come and go, so that maybe not subscribing is exactly what you want, but definitely when you're in the process, please get educated. It'll be so much more enjoyable for you to go through this. Now remember, if you are in that position, nobody's coming for you. So take action and get to work on your plan for buying or selling property successfully. And we'll see you in the next episode to do just that. Hey, thanks for listening. We appreciate you.